Hi, guys.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, this is Yolanda and Alina. We are coming to you from Lutz.
We're back.
Harper Therapy offices in Lutz, Florida. And so we just wanted to hop on. Alina and I had the opportunity to attend the 4th annual social work conference at St. Leo University on Friday. And we both happened to be presenting at the conference, which I think is super cool.
Yeah.
And I am so proud of Alina and the presentation that she and her panel gave. We both happened to be presenting on the topic of shame.
Serendipitously.
Yeah.
What do you know?
So we were like, how cool is that we were both presenting on shame? And it's just interesting that it was such a theme at the conference because we weren't the only ones who were talking about it. Judge Lynn Tepper from Pasco was the keynote presenter, and she even was talking about shame and humiliation. So we thought that we'd hop on because one of the things about shame is that none of us wants to admit that we experience shame, but the reality is that shame is part of the human condition. And the only people who are not able to experience shame are those people who are unable to have human connection and feel emotions. So usually what I say to people is, congratulations, if you experience shame, that means you're not a psychopath, a sociopath, because that would be an entirely different conversation for us to have. So the second thing about shame is that none of us wants to talk about it. So we're here to talk about it.
Yeah, I don't like talking about it.
Because the fact of the matter is, when we wrap words around shame, when we learn what it is, what it's not, and when we start speaking shame, it loses some of its power, right? So we're going to talk about 4 what we call self-conscious affects. And those 4 are shame, guilt, humiliation, and embarrassment. So Alina's going to tell us a little bit about the difference between those.
I'm going to try, Yolanda.
That's okay. You're going to do great.
So shame is this sense of, if something bad happens or if I do make a mistake or if I do something wrong in my life, which is human, right? We're human. We make mistakes. It's this internalization of that feeling of messing up. So it's saying instead of like, oh, this happened and separating myself from it, it's that idea of I am that, like owning this sense that I'm wrong or I'm bad. And, at the conference that I was at on Friday, I presented with one of my professors and one of 2 of my classmates, and we talked a lot about this shame being this inability or not knowing how to separate yourself from this quote-unquote negative experience. So, if it's someone who struggles with substance abuse, drug addiction, or, someone who deals with mental health disorder or diagnosis, or, someone who's in the LGBTQ community, of just identifying with this negative stigma on the outside that maybe society places, but internalizing it and making it about yourself. So that's really where shame plays in to the equation with one of those 4 affects. And then guilt is really this idea of, it's not me, I'm not wrong, it's maybe I did something wrong, or maybe other people think I'm doing something wrong, but it's really not owning that as who you are as a person. And then, moving on to humiliation and embarrassment. Humiliation, and I think Yolanda probably can speak to this a little better than I can because she actually did her presentation on this, with just about this idea of, kind of if someone, it's more of this external shame, like someone trying to shame me. And I think that story you gave about your daughter was really awesome on Friday, which really explained it. Yeah, I think it was helpful.
So my daughter had an experience at school where she was supposed to give a group presentation. And in an attempt to be quick about preparing for the presentation and changing for the presentation, she did a little quick change in the back of the classroom. Probably not the best choice, but again, she was a freshman in high school, and prefrontal cortex isn't always engaged to know what the best options are in those situations. But I ended up getting a call from the school, from the administration, and just the tone and the feel of the call left me feeling really icky and really confused, which is one of the ways that I know that I'm experiencing shame, like that sense of like, oh my God, what happened? What did I do that was wrong? How do I fix it? And so the reason that I knew that this experience was a humiliation for her is because she came home and she, walked through the door, and I was like, hey, baby, what happened? What was going on? And she burst into tears and she said, I'm not a bad kid, Mom. And just my heart broke. And I was like, of course you're not, baby. You are not a bad kid. Maybe you made a choice that wasn't a great choice, and here's some options for that making decision making in the future, but you are not a bad kid. So when we are experiencing shame from the outside, the difference between shame and humiliation in that instance is, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve to be treated like this. Like, I'm not a bad person.
And I think kind of going off of that with the humiliation, it's like guilt is this internalizing of like, oh, I really messed up, and kind of putting that on myself. Whereas humiliation is someone else kind of putting that, like, oh, you did something wrong, and kind of not owning it as who I am, but just kind of saying like, it's coming from the outside. And then embarrassment is really kind of, it's a lot lighter, embarrassment is, maybe like opening a jar and of tomato sauce or a can of soda, and it explodes everywhere, and you're like, oh, I'm embarrassed, or tripping in public, kind of laughing at yourself over
toilet paper on your shoe.
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Food like between your teeth.
Right. Like, you're not going to own it and say, I'm a horrible person, or I should feel guilty because I have toilet paper on my shoe. It's just kind of this like, ooh.
It's fleeting, and you can find it funny, maybe not in that moment, but afterwards. Yeah. Good job. You did it.
Check A.
So really that shame at its core is the fear of disconnection. And that makes sense because in our caveman days, like, that was life or death. If we were part of a social group with protection, then that was life. And if there was a fear of disconnection, if there was shame, then that meant life or death. So that's why there's a high correlation between shame and unhealthy behavior like addiction, anxiety, depression, bullying, eating disorders. Shame is never a good thing, right? And shame comes along with these gremlins of not enoughness. You're not good enough, smart enough.
You don't deserve.
You're
a part of.
Unworthy of love and belonging. And if we can get a hold on that side of what our shame gremlins say, then shame on the other side says, ooh, step back. Who do you think you are? Right? So this sounds very familiar, right? Guilt, on the other hand, when we can differentiate who we are and what we do, guilt is, wow, that behavior was not my best. It's not in alignment with my values, my integrity, the person that I'm striving to be. But at least I can make changes to my behavior, right? If shame is my identity, then there's no real hope there, because that's how I've identified myself. That's who I am, this bad person. So little conversation, starting some shame busting.
Yeah, and one thing I just wanted to add too that we kind of touched on in the beginning is that shame really grows exorbitantly in the darkness. Like, when we don't share it and we kind of don't shed the light on it, it's like mildew or mold that just really spreads when it's dark and damp, and when we're able to share those feelings with trusted individuals in our lives and that positive support, it diminishes so much.
So reach out to part of your tribe. Give us a call. We can help you identify those shame triggers, the shame gremlins, give you some skills. And stay tuned for some follow-up Facebook Lives, because not only does shame kind of dissipate as we share our shame stories, but it also, when it's doused with empathy and self-compassion, it just totally diminishes. So we'll talk more about that in another time. But otherwise, happy Tuesday, guys. Have a good rest of your day.
Keep warm.